Dawn breaks over New Orleans, but the silence is heavy, almost unnatural. The city's breath catches as police arrive at another crime scene. Inside a quiet neighborhood home, a figure had slipped through the back, forcing the door open with a chisel left carelessly on the floor. The house isn't ransacked. Money, jewelry, all valuables remain untouched. Only two things linger: the suffocating stillness and the unmistakable trail of blood. For months, fear gripped every household. Then, as spring approached in 1919, the city was shaken by a letter, chilling in both its confidence and its threat. "I am the demon from the hottest hell," it declared, signed by someone calling himself the Axeman. His message was simple, almost theatrical. On the night of March the 19th, anyone who did not play jazz in their home would meet death. That night, New Orleans became a city of music and dread. Behind every lit window, gramophones crackled and pianos played into the small hours, while families sat tense, listening for footsteps in the dark. What kind of killer makes his victims play jazz for their lives? If it was just a bluff, why did the bloodshed pause? And if not, why choose music as his signal? These are the riddles that, over a century later, still haunt the city's shadowed corners. But to understand the Axeman's true legacy, we have to go back. Back to the people whose lives he shattered, and to the night when everything changed. Victims and background. To truly understand the chilling reign of the Axeman, we have to start with his chosen victims and the world they lived in. In the early 20th century, New Orleans was a vibrant, chaotic melting pot, a place where cultures, languages, and ambitions collided. Yet behind the lively jazz and bustling markets, a quieter community kept mostly to itself. Families of Italian and Sicilian immigrants, many of whom ran small grocery stores scattered across the city. Their lives followed a familiar routine. By day, they worked long hours behind the counter. By night, they slept in modest rooms behind or above their shops, keeping close to both family and business. It should have been a safe existence. But beginning in May 1918, this fragile sense of safety was shattered. Between May 1918 and October 1919, a series of attacks struck terror into these neighborhoods. The Axeman's victims were, almost without exception, Italian grocers and their families. Some whispered it was more than coincidence. Was it a message or something darker? Each attack followed a hauntingly similar pattern. The intruder would wait until deep in the night. He would force his way in, most often by removing a panel from the back door using a chisel, and once inside, he would seize whatever weapon was at hand: a razor, a butcher's knife, but most often, an axe belonging to the family. As the attacks continued, fear quickly spread among New Orleans' Italian community. Rumors grew. Was the Axeman one of them? Or was he driven by hatred for their people? Police found themselves lost between cultural tensions and rising panic. Meanwhile, outside the headlines, everyday life turned into a constant state of vigilance, doors double-locked, and every stranger eyed with suspicion. Even as the city tried to move forward, the shadow of the Axeman lingered. No one felt safe. And worst of all, the killer's identity remained an enigma. Who was the figure slipping through the darkness? And why had he chosen these families, this city? The answers, for now, remained buried in fear and silence. Tensions and early warnings. But nothing erupts in a vacuum. Even before the Axeman's name struck terror into New Orleans, signs of something dark simmered beneath the surface. The city's Italian community, already viewed with suspicion by some locals, became the unwitting center of rumors and accusations. Prejudice wasn't new here, but after the first attacks, old fears took on a new, dangerous urgency. The earliest known assault came on May 23, 1918, when Joseph and Catherine Maggio were found brutally attacked in their home behind a grocery store. Not long after, Louis Bessumer and Harriet Lowe faced a similar fate on June 27th. Each time, the scene told a familiar story. A quiet night shattered, the back door forced open by a chisel, the weapon, a razor or axe, taken from the victim's own kitchen. By August, attacks on Anna Schneider and Joseph Romano only deepened the city's sense of panic. As these incidents piled up, patterns began to emerge, but so did speculation. Was this a targeted vendetta against Italian immigrants, or merely coincidence? Did the attacker hold a personal grudge, or was he simply driven by opportunity and madness? Police struggled to separate fact from rumor. Yet the community couldn't shake the feeling that something, or someone, was deliberately stalking their neighborhoods. And then, the speculation turned toxic. Whispers about the Black Hand, a shadowy criminal network, spread like wildfire. Soon, wild accusations against Italian Americans filled newspapers and fueled public distrust. Innocent families, already reeling from the violence, now faced a double threat: fear of the Axeman and fear of becoming scapegoats. Inside each home, anxiety grew. Parents kept children indoors. Neighbors watched one another with wary eyes. Night after night, the city held its breath, waiting for the next attack and wondering if it could have been prevented. In a city famous for its music and spirit, paranoia became the new refrain. But behind closed doors, not even locked windows could keep out the sense of doom. For the families at risk, every creak in the night was a question. When would the Axeman return? And who, if anyone, would be able to stop him? The Night of Terror. A case in focus, Gretna, March 10th, 1919. March 10th, 1919. The town of Gretna, just across the Mississippi from New Orleans, is shrouded in the pale silence before dawn. In the Cortimiglia family's small home, a nightmare is about to unfold, one that will send shockwaves far beyond the Italian community. At approximately 2 a.m., someone forces open the back door. The method is chillingly familiar. A wooden panel pried loose, a chisel abandoned on the floor. There's no sign of theft, no valuables missing, only the family's own axe, used as a weapon and then discarded at the scene. Inside, chaos erupts. Charles and Rosie Cortimiglia are brutally attacked as they sleep. When neighbors, alarmed by screams, rush to help, they find a devastating scene. Charles and Rosie, both severely injured, are barely clinging to life. But their 2-year-old daughter, Mary, is gone. The community reels at the news. A life lost, a family destroyed. In the immediate aftermath, fear transforms into anger. The authorities, under immense pressure to find someone responsible, turn to the only available witness, Rosie Cortimiglia. Still weak and traumatized, Rosie identifies 2 neighbors, I. Orlando and Frank Giordano, as the attackers. Within days, both are arrested, and the city briefly believes the Axeman has been caught. But questions linger. If this was a robbery, why was nothing taken? If the motive was personal, why leave the weapon behind? And what about the eerie consistency? The forced back door, the use of the family's own axe, the lack of any evidence tying the accused to the scene. As the days pass, a new fear takes hold. The Axeman's letter to the Times-Picayune, threatening death to anyone not playing jazz on March 19th, casts a long shadow. On that night, music fills the city, but no attack comes. Was it a twisted game? Or something more? A social experiment in fear? For Gretna and for New Orleans, the Cortimiglia tragedy becomes a symbol of the case's chaos and confusion. The Axeman still walks free, and the city is left to wonder, will justice ever come? Or is the true killer still out there, hiding in plain sight? The investigation, witnesses, forensics, and dead ends. As panic gripped New Orleans, law enforcement scrambled for answers. The investigation, however, would reveal just how elusive the Axeman really was. In those days, forensic science was still in its infancy, and detectives depended heavily on witness testimony, physical clues, and the relentless pressure of public opinion. Rosie Cortimiglia's identification of Orlando and Frank Giordano provided police with their first concrete suspects. Yet her statement was made while she was in a state of shock, barely recovered from her injuries and trauma. Soon, doubts began to emerge. The story didn't add up. The accused men had no motive, and crucially, there was no solid evidence connecting them to the scene. Even Rosie herself would later retract her claim, leaving investigators back at square one. Physical evidence at each scene told a peculiar story. The method of entry was consistent. The back door forced open with a chisel, the tool left behind. The weapon? Always taken from the victim's own home, never brought by the intruder. Money, jewelry, and valuables were left untouched. These weren't robberies gone wrong. The motive was something else entirely. But what? Witness statements from other cases did little to clarify the picture. Descriptions of the attacker were vague at best. A shadowy figure seen fleeing into the night, never clearly identified. The city's Italian community, already on edge, grew suspicious of law enforcement, fearing that prejudice and rumor would steer the investigation astray. Theories flourished, but hard facts were scarce. One name cropped up in whispers and legend: Mumfrey, or Mumfrey, rumored to be a criminal mastermind behind the murders. Yet official records offered no proof, and at times, this alleged mastermind was said to be in prison during several of the attacks. The deeper police dug, the more the case seemed to slip through their fingers. Each clue raised more questions than answers. Why did the killer target these families? Was it personal or something darker? And with every new attack, the fear that the Axeman would never be caught grew stronger. In the end, for every lead investigators chased, another door closed. And in the shadows of New Orleans, the Axeman's legend only grew. The Turning Point. Key Evidence and a City on Edge, December 1920. Nearly 2 years had passed since the first brutal attack, and New Orleans was still haunted by unanswered questions. Then, a dramatic twist. Rosie Cortimiglia, the central witness in the Gretna case, formally retracted her accusation. She admitted her earlier identification of the Giordano father and son had been a mistake, made while she was still overwhelmed by trauma and grief. With this confession, the only solid case against any suspect completely collapsed. The courts had no choice. Orlando and Frank Giordano were set free, and with their release, the investigation's last remaining thread unraveled. The public, once hungry for a conviction, was forced to confront an uncomfortable truth. The case against the Giordano family had relied on little more than confusion and community pressure. Justice, it seemed, had become another casualty of fear. Yet the Axeman's grip on the city wasn't just about violence. It was about psychological terror. The infamous jazz letter sent to the Times-Picayune before the night of March 19, 1919, remained a chilling artifact. In a move that stunned the nation, the Axeman promised safety only to those willing to fill their homes with jazz music. That night, New Orleans became a living experiment in mass panic and superstition. Incredibly, no attacks were reported. A single night of uneasy peace orchestrated by a murderer's whims. This jazz night quickly passed into local legend. Was the Axeman toying with the city, testing its limits, or was it all just a bluff? Some believed the killer relished the chaos he created, manipulating public fear as deftly as any criminal mastermind. Others saw a desperate city clinging to hope in the face of evil it couldn't understand. As the dust settled, it became clear. The Axeman's identity was as much a mystery as ever. The investigation was left in tatters, the city traumatized, and the legend only grew, blurring the line between truth and myth. Would the real Axeman ever be unmasked? Or had he already faded back into the shadows, leaving only questions behind? Trials, verdicts, and lingering doubts. In the end, no one was ever convicted as the Axeman of New Orleans. The trial of Iorlando and Frank Giordano, once held up as a victory for justice, now stood as a stark reminder of the dangers of hasty conclusions and flawed investigations. When Rosie Cortimiglia took back her accusation, the entire case unraveled before the court's eyes. The Giordano family was set free, their names cleared, but the scars left by suspicion and public outrage would linger for years. Beyond this single failed prosecution, the authorities struggled to find any other suspects who fit the evidence. The community, still reeling from the violence and the frenzy it provoked, had no closure. People whispered names, Mumfrey, Momfrey, and other figures more myth than man. But none of these rumors stood up to real scrutiny. In fact, some records suggested that so-called suspects weren't even in New Orleans when the murders took place, or were already in prison during the spree. As time passed, the city's attention drifted. The jazz music faded, the headlines grew old, and life resumed its usual rhythms, but always with an undercurrent of unease. Families still bolted their doors at night, wondering if the Axeman might someday return. For investigators, the case became a cautionary tale about the perils of relying too much on unreliable witness testimony and giving in to the pressure of public panic. Perhaps that's the Axeman's most haunting legacy, a crime spree that left behind not just victims, but an entire city's sense of safety shattered. Without a conviction, with no clear suspect or motive, New Orleans was left to grapple with the uncertainty. Had the Axeman simply vanished, or was he hiding in plain sight, another face in the crowd? To this day, the question remains, and so the Axeman's shadow continues to linger, a permanent riddle woven into the city's history. Aftermath, legacy, and lessons. Why did the Axeman case prove so impossible to solve? Even a century later, investigators and historians point to a perfect storm of obstacles: faded footprints, makeshift weapons found at the scene, no clear motive of robbery, and a suspect who seemed to move like a phantom. At a time when forensic science was limited, even the best detectives struggled to make sense of the chaos. Fear clouded judgment. Rumors raced ahead of facts. Yet the Axeman left more than tragedy behind. In the wake of the killings, New Orleans found itself forever changed. The infamous letter published on March 16, 1919, demanding jazz as a talisman against death, became a strange badge of the city's resilience and folklore. The piece, the mysterious Axeman's Jazz, Don't Scare Me Papa, was composed and performed, turning a night of dread into a survival ritual. For one night, jazz music became a shield, and the whole city moved in unison, uncertain whether they were facing a madman or merely dancing to his tune. With the years, the story of the Axeman shifted from raw terror to urban legend. Countless theories, books, and even movies would revisit the case, each adding new layers of myth. Some claimed the Axeman escaped to Los Angeles, where he was shot by a victim's widow. But such tales remain unproven, lost to the fog of rumor and time. The real lesson of the Axeman case runs deeper. When fear and prejudice take hold, justice can falter. The wrongful accusation and imprisonment of the Giordano family revealed how quickly a city can be blinded by panic. Even now, the true identity of the Axeman remains a mystery, buried somewhere between the city's love of music and its haunted memories. The Axeman's reign is a cautionary tale, not just of violence, but of how myths are born, how suspicion divides, and how history can be shaped as much by fear as by fact. The music played on, but for New Orleans, the scars would never fully fade. The Axeman of New Orleans remains one of America's most chilling and mysterious unsolved cases. Between 1918 and 1919, a shadowy figure targeted families, often Italian grocers, slipping through the night, leaving behind shattered lives but stealing nothing of value. As panic swept the city, a bizarre letter dared New Orleans to play jazz for survival, turning one fearful night into legend. Despite massive investigations, no one was ever convicted. Today, the Axeman's legacy endures as both a warning and a haunting riddle. When fear and prejudice take control, justice itself can become lost in the noise. Want to explore more of history's greatest true crime mysteries? Like and follow our channel to dive deeper into the world's most chilling unsolved cases and join the investigation.